Hey everyone, so I thought I'd give you an update on how the build's going. So if you're figuring out what to do with the next step in any part of your Skyline build, these are the things I've kind of learned from doing it so far. It's got to do with, organization, parts you need, things you should change out. So currently I got to the point where the head's off, right? So it's sitting over here, and very shortly I'm going to send this out for machining to get all nice new flat surfaces on there. I'm going to check all the valves, see if they're leaking. Just kind of pour some water down inside, and if they don't leak out, then I'm not really going to bother doing a valve job, and that's based on how many miles I have on the engine. So this thing's got about 58,000 miles on it, so it's a relatively healthy engine. I didn't see any damage or really any marking on the cams here, so they're looking good. My original plan was change them, and I know a lot of people do for bigger power, but I've heard and seen the graphs that you can do 500 horsepower on stock internals, so as long as they're healthy, right? Over here I started scotch brighting the whole bay. So I'm gonna put all new paint in here because the it's looking a lot better, but you can see like the deep scratching, and especially over here where the battery was, this is gonna be like a corroded area in any of these. So basically, with all the ground points, where you have a ground point, you're gonna get some corrosion. I'm just moving the battery to the trunk, and basically I'm just gonna cut right into this is positive, and well, this is positive too, but positive and negative, you just splice them, you put them through the hole over there and all the way through the floor of the trunk. So that's what I'm going to be doing later on. I've gotten to the point where I've cleaned up a lot of stuff, so some of that is the Hikis all-wheel system. So when I got the car, it was just a lockout bar on the back. I threw out the bigger part of the front pump there, but this is the rear part right here, so it was just blocked out like that, and it was kind of overheating the power steering pump. So if you're thinking of doing Hikis or Hicas elimination, I'd strongly suggest just taking the whole system out. You can actually just take the tubes that came from it, right? There's one, it's the two top tubes that sit right on top of it, and basically it goes from your power steering pump to that system, and then all the way back. It comes up through here, and it went down in front of the radiator to get a little bit of cooling, came back and back to the pump. So it was this huge mess. So by just removing that front pump, which is also connected to the rear pump, which is pretty easy, there's just a few bolts holding the bracket on, and they were right in this area. You just start pulling it apart, and basically right where you see those lines right there, you see this loop? That's exactly where I had just I looped it back so it could basically just go from the power steering pump and right back to itself, instead of having to go through a whole system. Or you could just leave the tubes. It was the tubes that went in front of the radiator down and back around, so you could keep those, but I just didn't want them being in front of my radiator. If you do have overheating issues, or it's misting or something out of the reservoir, which I did take out over there, then basically instead of looping it with a simple $2 line down there, you just put in a cooler for your power steering fluid, and you're good to go. One thing I did run into, and you should get yourself one, is a oil relocation kit. Luckily, when I got this, it already had one. This right here is where your oil filter and the oil cooler usually sits at the start of these engines. So that's how they were built, is that right there is where everything sits. So this assembly sits there, and it's bolted on right by these bolts. You get coolant running through the top and cooling it, and your oil filter would usually screw right onto there with a pressure sensor. But that's also the reason you have these a lot of these mess of tubes here. This one specifically, this tube is that has coolant in it, and it runs through that. So this port here running to this end of the tube, that's what goes through that cooler. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that tube out and replace it with a newer piece, so I'm not just getting, you know, rust running through my system, and also a cleaner look. In replacement of that old oil cooler, you can get this and actually thread it right onto the block. As long as you have an external oil cooler, you're good to go. Basically, you have to get another threaded piece, fit in the center of this, and it screws into the block. While this sits on there, you don't need the bolts, the 4 bolts on there to hold it in. And then you have an inlet and outlet line, and your pressure sensor's already there. So that plumbs to this, right? So you have an in and out and an in and out in this. One comes in and through to an oil cooler, back to your engine. That's what this line and that line are for. They go to my oil cooler, and my oil cooler is right inside of the bumper, so it has nice airflow. Minor issue that I ran into was having the power steering reservoir sitting right here. Basically, with a top mount turbo manifold, if you want a little bit of a bigger turbo, you can't have that sitting there. So my next move is, I think, order another reservoir. You'll notice that the front fan is taken off the engine. This is the fan right here, and eventually you're probably going to have some kind of issue with cracking, and it's kind of like a recurring theme all the way around this thing. So company GK Tech makes a lot of parts for these cars, which is really nice. So what I just got was this is an adapter. You basically get a what is it, SR20 fan, and this is an adapter they make for it, and it's a really nice plate, all machined out, and I think the plate's like $20 or something like that. But this is an adapter to the original holder for the fan, so that fan over there would bolt onto this, but it wouldn't, you know, a 240 fan wouldn't fit onto that. So you get this adapter that fits on nicely right on like that, and they give you all the hardware for the fan when it comes in, and your adapter here, which is awesome. So I would definitely recommend that, because you actually, they're saying you get like 40% more airflow or something, and it's a little bit lighter, so definitely nice. I grabbed a Mishimoto thermostat. So the old one wasn't looking bad, but I mean, thermostat's got to go eventually, right? This is the original fuel rail for the car, side feed injectors. So since I got the ISR intake, it came with a new fuel rail, which is awesome. Thing is, you got to put top feed injectors into it, which is actually, it's a much better idea to put the top mount feed, since, you know, it's less likely to leak and you can get higher CC out of it. The RB20 injectors can actually be run on an RB25 harness, so they're both high impedance. I asked a guy at Anjuku Racing, and he said, yeah, they'll fit right in, they're good to go. So a top feed RB20 or RB25 injector will work. So I hope these were some helpful guidelines. The use you get out of this information. Took me some time to research. Parts you definitely should replace. I mean, obviously, oil pump and water pump aren't too bad. That together is like 400, actually maybe like 300, something around there. The fan from GK Tech, you can get the adapter and the fan for like 80. Oil relocation, if you're getting like a whole kit, it could be somewhere like 200, maybe something like that, but it's definitely worth it. Keeps your oil, you know, definitely cooler. You're gonna have less leaks, less issues in the long run. Also, I took the old charcoal canister out, which is a really easy job. You just disconnect the hoses, and the hoses that went to it, just just pull them. One is a fuel tank vent, so cut it halfway down your car and just leave it as it is. It's a vent, but don't leave it, you know, next to anything electrical like alternator, like, you know, don't leave it in the engine bay. So far I haven't run into too many issues. There really aren't many things wrong with these engines. They're really well built. So as long as you keep it, you know, clean and don't just half-ass it, it'll go back together good, turn out nice. So good luck.